Thank you, Peter. Good morning, everyone. My name is Charlotte Ruhe, and I'm the Managing Director for Central and Southeast Europe, which of course includes Greece. It's a real pleasure to be here. So if we can just go, yes. The bank has been working in Greece since 2015, and we've actually come in and had quite a substantial impact in a very short period of time. We've invested 1.5 billion euros in 30 companies, and our strategy is threefold. So first of all, working with the corporate sector to strengthen innovation, to help with inclusion, particularly on skills and working with youth to bring them into the workforce, and working with export-oriented companies. So I'm very pleased to see some of our clients here. Demand. We also have provided financing for Polfish, Mytilineos, Furlis, PeopleCert, the DECA, the Diorama Growth Fund, Southbridge SME Fund, as well as OTE and Titan. So the corporate sector has really received a lot of our financing. In fact, unusually for EBRD, our financing in Greece is 100% private sector. So if we move on to our second pillar of our activity, it's really focused on the financial sector. So when we started working in Greece, the first thing we did was to make equity investments into the 4 systemic banks. And now we are working with them to diversify the funding structure, helping with the resilience in that respect. So we've provided covered bonds, or worked with issue of covered bonds for Piraeus and NBG, and then worked on loan securitizations with Alpha Bank and NBG. The other thing we're doing is providing the trade facilitation program to help the companies that are importing or exporting, and we've provided 200 million in financing last year alone. Greece is the biggest country of operations for us now for the trade facilitation program. And when you consider that Turkey was the leading country, that says a lot for the demand for this kind of financing in Greece. The other thing I wanted to mention then is that we're also working on the NPE, NPL problem. So we're investing in servicers, we're investing in portfolios, and we're also taking on individual workouts for larger exposures with the banks on a case-by-case basis. The last area where we're working is on the infrastructure and energy sector, helping with privatization, commercialization, and enhancing regional integration. So last year we invested in the Fraport in the regional airport privatization, 187 million transaction. We've also provided financing to Hellenic Petroleum, Terna Energy, and Energean. So that's a picture of EBRD in a nutshell. You can go to the next slide. Those are just to reiterate the points I've made. I don't have a lot of time left, and we want to leave opportunity for questions, particularly on the transition report, but also on our business in Greece. So I'll wrap up with that. Thank you very much.
So we're very happy to take any questions. I think we have maybe 10 minutes or so.
Perhaps you can tell us about this is, if I'm not mistaken, this is a situation with EBRD where it used to cover Greece, then as Greece developed, it stopped and then came back. So if you would give us some institutional memory of what changed between the first time you covered Greece and the second.
Thank you. Well, in fact, we didn't officially cover Greece as a country of operations until 2015. What we did before was to invest with Greek banks and Greek companies in our previous confines of Eastern Europe. And now the bank has expanded. We started out in Central and Eastern Europe in 1991, and then we included Mongolia, then Turkey, then Egypt, Jordan, Tunisia, and Morocco, then Lebanon and West Bank, and in that period, in the last couple of years, was when we started working in Greece and Cyprus.
Okay, hello. May I just have your view as an economist on the macro imbalances of the country. I mean, as you know, there is a big discussion on the debt problem and whether the country can go back on a sustainable growth track. Can it do that, having all this debt overhang, in its balance sheets?
Well, this is the, yes,
This one works.
so this is indeed the, the key question facing the country over the coming years. I think it's a bit of a mixed picture because you say macroeconomic imbalances. Actually, the flow imbalances are largely corrected. So the country is now running a fiscal balance or a slight surplus even, and significant primary surpluses. And on the external side, the current account is more or less in balance as well. So those are what we typically look at first for macroeconomic imbalances, and if those are all in deficit, then these are flashing red signals. So I think there's a lot of credit due to the authorities for the work they've done to correct those. But when you look at the stock, indeed, you have still a huge debt overhang, huge NPLs overhang. So how to deal with those? So my view is that, I take an optimistic view about the long-term prospects of this country because I really think that now it's visible the improvements that are being made. There is a bit of confidence coming back, and we're seeing these in the confidence indicators that are published every month by the Bank of Greece. But we're also seeing it just by looking around and by talking to some of you at this conference. I think it's clear that in the short term we're going to see some growth here. Now, will it be, it would be disappointing if it was just 2% growth for the coming years. We really we'd like to see 4 or 5% growth for the, yeah. Yeah, well, the question is how to go from this 2% to this 4 or 5%, and that really depends on substantial investment flows coming in, and that's really why we are here. I mean, in our small way, this is what we're trying to bring to Greece. So I feel I can credibly say to investors that there are opportunities in Greece, and that there will be growth in Greece, and I don't believe there'll be another crisis or a debt crisis. So I'm confident that the debt can be managed over time, and that the creditors will be sensible and put in measures that will allow the debt to be sustainable. I'm confident that the NPL problem will be addressed over time. It's a difficult one, and we have a panel on that later to discuss it. But again, I think the measures that have been put in place to address that will help and will bring that down over time. So, on balance, I see a bright future for Greece, but I think it's quite a way in the distance, because to get to really strong, sustainable growth rates, you need to address, the country needs to address the issue of lack of investment. And what's holding back investment? It's some of these things that I showed here, the problems with governance, problems with judicial reform, problems in the business environment. Those really have to be tackled to really bring in strong investment flows and then strong growth. Yes.
Actually, 3 to 4, 5% is beyond the upper range of what most people are looking at in terms of medium and long-term growth. The IMF is around 1%, which is, if we are there after all the structural reforms we've done, then why did we do them? The Commission is more closer to 1.5. So, obviously the EBRD's role and all the foreign investment coming in will be an important leverage effect to be able to. But my question is actually different. Could you give us a bit more granularity on the energy and infrastructure projects that the EBRD is thinking of or is currently involved, the kind of projects you're looking at, the approach, a bit more on that?
Well, we usually don't talk about our pipeline until deals are signed. So maybe rather than tell you about individual things, I tell you the kind of things we like to do. So we're very interested in working on PPPs here. We're interested in more privatizations like the regional airports. And we keep a constant dialogue with the government, particularly on this kind of regional infrastructure, on the energy sector. And I would say that there's a lot of things that the bank is doing in other countries that we haven't yet had the opportunity to do here. Our mandate has been relatively short, but I think we've really sort of dove in the deep end and become very active very fast. But we're discussing now the possibility of extending this mandate, and I think that will offer us more room and time to deal with some of these projects that take time to develop, that can't just be put together in a few months. I would also mention the property sector is a really important one. So with Demand, we're working on urban regeneration, and this kind of thing really can turn around an area in a city that is really not offering economic value to the city and its citizens. And so this kind of thing for us is also very important, although it's not related at all to the state. Is that?
What is your investment horizon, and do you have capital committed for Greece in the coming years?
Well, our horizon right now is to 2020, but as I mentioned, we're in a discussion with the authorities because we see, and I think, and what I've heard from ministers we've spoken to, is there's an interest in continuing because, you know, with the country starting to turn the corner on the growth and a sense of greater stability, we also see an opportunity for a lot more private sector investment, where people were waiting before to see what was happening, kind of holding back on investing. We think this is going to start moving now. And of course, I think now we also see more movement on privatizations and some of the investments in the infrastructure.
Thank you. Nikos Porphyris from the Athens Exchange. You have not mentioned that you've helped a lot rebuild the corporate bond market. The question is, given that governance is one of the sectors that's lacking some transparency, do you see the equity stake that you have in that you hold in different companies to be a way to leverage governance through the exchange or through boosting financing for companies via the exchange with increased corporate governance?
Yes, absolutely. Thanks for mentioning that. Developing the capital market and helping individual companies with their corporate governance is a real priority for us. So wherever we take an equity stake, we almost always have a nominee on the board. We look at, you know, making sure that the company, for example, with the banks, we work on the audit committees and things like this. So governance is something we really focus on, and we see an opportunity to deliver change in the market. And I would say the other thing we're working on is helping to develop products to get more equity to SMEs, intermediated, of course, like DECA, because we don't want to try to do these ourselves. They're too small for the bank. We don't have that kind of manpower, but and really the time and effort. But we are very happy to have our partners to deliver corporate governance changes in the companies where we invest with them.
I see the clock has wound down. We probably have to wind up. I'd like to thank you all for attending on behalf of Charlotte and myself, but please help yourselves to a copy of the report if you haven't done it already. So take one for your friend as well. So.